Looking to serve your clients at the highest level possible, but want to make sure that you stay compliant? Today, we're going to share with you exactly what you can do to make sure that everything you put out there is absolutely in line with what you'd want it to be.
Welcome to Real Estate AI Flash, the podcast dedicated to real estate professionals to demystify AI and give you practical strategies that you can apply to your business today. I'm your co-host, Rajeev Sajja.
And the other co-host, Jimmy Burgess, and we are excited for you to be a part of this. If you haven't had a chance yet, make sure you go out and that you subscribe to the podcast. Also, we would really appreciate if you could leave us a review. It helps us spread the message that as a real estate community, we are stronger together. Now let's get to this episode.
Welcome to another episode of Real Estate AI Flash, where we're dedicated to powering you with all of the AI highlights to help you move your real estate career forward. And today's topic, Jimmy, is going to be a fun one. A lot has been said about real estate listing descriptions, which was the low-hanging fruit when Chat GPT first came out. But Chat GPT is not a real estate agent. The audience listening to this are. So there's some things that we need to put in place that we hope this episode will help you understand. So when you put something out, or as we call it in our 4P episode, publish, you can stand by what you're publishing. So this is all about making you look good, and we call it responsible AI. So let's get into it, Jimmy.
Yeah, I would just say as we get started with this, if you're an agent out there and you're listening to this, this is kind of the check yourself portion of making sure that we get this, and also really giving you the opportunity to put your best foot forward and to feel confident in what you're doing. Because I think when we first started, Rajeev and you and I have talked about this, a lot of times when we first started, we thought, well, this is just easy. We'll just do this. And there were some mistakes made. And we're going to try to hopefully in this episode, not only help people not make the mistakes, but to really put their best foot forward and serve their client at the highest possible level in the right way, so to speak.
Yeah. And, one of the earlier episodes, we talked about the difference between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. 4 we know is technically more accurate, but it still lies on things because it's a collection of information from all across the internet. So when you ask for, let's start with the listing description component. When you ask it to write a listing description, it may not understand Fair Housing Act. And you as a real estate agent have spent, I think, 160 hours to get your license. And part of that education was to make sure you don't use words that are violation of the Fair Housing Act. So you need to make sure that the words that it comes out with are in compliance with the Fair Housing Act. And you know the act, and ChatGPT really doesn't, right?
Yeah. So the defense of this is something that ChatGPT gave me is not going to stand. This is where we need to have and be the professional and make sure that it's done correctly. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this, Rajeev, and make sure that we've got everybody equipped and ready to go.
Yeah. So, it reminds me of a quote from the Oracle of Omaha, Mr. Warren Buffett, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, don't publish anything that you're not comfortable being on the front page of the newspaper, right? And when you write listing descriptions, and I've done enough of them to know that if you don't give it the framework of understanding certain things or avoiding certain words is a great way to kind of polish it a little bit. But even if it puts something out, make sure you read it and it's in compliance of the Fair Housing Act. And that Fair Housing Act is just one of those things. I mean, it might just be when you're writing email marketing, not just for a property, it could use words that you're really not comfortable with, right? So make sure that you're in compliance with that component of it. And there's other aspects of I listened to a podcast the other day that talked about RESPA. Like if you're writing about something about mortgage and making sure that you're in RESPA compliance, that's another area. So compliance is a great piece here that I think ChatGPT is known to get. You can educate ChatGPT on some of these things, but it's still not going to be a finished product. And that's where a real estate agent comes in, and you need to put your eyes on it. And as Gino Blafari would always use a sports analogy, you can get it to a 5-yard line, but you got to polish it and get it into the end zone.
Yeah. And what's going to be fun about this is Rajeev, we're going to give them some front end tactics on how they can frame this and where they can do the prompt in a way that'll help them prepare this in the best way possible. But again, you just want to make sure you do those second things. So,
yeah. So one of the things I always like to kind of put a box around what you're asking ChatGPT to do. So what it puts out is really at the 1 yard line. You still need to read it and you still need to make sure it's compliant. So as an example, you could say you're a highly experienced real estate agent with a lot of marketing expertise. Your expertise includes the understanding of the Fair Housing Act. Let me pause there for a second. Just because you said that doesn't mean it still understands it. You still need to read the output, but you're giving it the framework. The other component is you can say, do not talk about specific types of buyers or buyer circumstances. Do not reference age, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. And when you start to use those words in the prompt, the output will be absolutely at the 1 yard line and you can finish it quickly versus just saying, write a listing description for 117 Main Street. And it's just going to go off the rails because it just doesn't understand some of the things you don't want it to use. Right, Jimmy, any comments there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this is the thing is again, it goes back to the 4 Ps. It's priming it properly on the front end before you prompt it to make sure that you're asking it to do what you want. And then it's almost like bookends. You want to make sure you give it the right information on the front, but the publishing, before you publish, you got to make sure that you polish this in a way that it is absolutely covering you and making sure you're doing things correctly.
Yeah. And the other day I was driving on the turnpike here, Jimmy. I'm sure there's turnpikes in Florida. And there's guardrails on the left. So if you start to go off, it's going to remind you this is not a good idea, right? So it's the same way. You're trying to give Chat GPT guardrails, and the guardrails are making sure it understands it. Now, as we get into GPT-4, you can actually upload the documents of the Fair Housing Act, and you can really be lesser than a 1 yard line. Okay. And that's for another episode. But I think this is all about making sure the work you put out is your word, your voice, and it's compliant, and it's compliant with all of the acts that you need to follow. So your word is your bond, and in our industry, that's what makes sense.
Yeah. And Rajeev, it's not just on the MLS descriptions. A lot of times, if you're doing very specific ads, I know we've found that sometimes when we'll prompt specific, I'm going to just use Instagram, for instance, if we want it to give us an SEO optimized post and we give it the information on the property, sometimes what it will do is it will veer off and try to figure out who that ideal client is for us. And we'll kind of step across the line a little bit. So if you see some of that, what we've done is we'll go in on the back after it comes in and just make sure that this is compliant with the Fair Housing Law. There's certain things we can prompt also. But again, doesn't matter what it is, the output, you just want to make sure, as you said, when you put it there, you want to make sure it's there. You reference the Oracle of Omaha saying that. I would say make sure that you reference the Oracle of Real Estate Technology, Rajeev Sajja, and make sure that you got everything covered there. So I've never said that before, Rajeev, but that is absolutely, I think that's...
I don't know. That's a very high compliment that I need to work my entire life
Deserved,
to,
my friend.
I appreciate
Deserved. Well deserved. Yeah. So no, this is exciting because this is another one of those where if we're going to use the technology, we want to make sure that we use it responsibly. It's not about just getting the best output. It's about making sure that you're doing it in a responsible way that leads to you to be able to serve the people at the highest level and make sure that you're, as you said, staying inside of those guardrails that are going to keep you safe.
Yeah. If I could draw an analogy as we wind down this podcast is, think about writing an email, actually writing an email, and you start to write it. It goes through your human filter. Oh, I don't want to use those words. And it comes out with the output. The only difference here is Chat GPT is writing it. It just still has to go through your human filter. So you can correct it, and it's your word, and it's compliant, and it is what your clients expect today.
That's exactly right. Yeah, Rajeev, this has been so valuable. Listen, if you've gotten something out of this, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We're going to continue, Rajeev and I are going to continue to do our best to give you the best information possible so that you can leverage this artificial intelligence to serve your clients at the highest level possible. Take care, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care.
This podcast has been produced by TSC Studios. Music is courtesy of Soundstripe. Audio and video editing is provided by Noah Escobar. Graphic design by Melinda McKnight. And special thanks to Jordan Wilson of Your Everyday AI for the inspiration and expertise.